Hey guys, I had the amazing opportunity last week to interview Scott Gallant from Provenir Design. That guy's got about 15 years experience with Syntropic Ag and permaculture. And we really dive really deep into different subjects pertaining to that. And that was just awesome. There's plenty of gems in this interview that you won't find anywhere else. So stick around and watch the full interview.
Hey guys, so today I have Scott Gallant. I'm interviewing him and I'm going to give you a little intro of him and then we're going to ask him a couple questions. So, Scott grew up in Ohio in the US. His grandfather was a garlic farmer and his great grandfather was a famous popcorn farmer. Scott got a degree in economics. He was quite disconnected from the natural world, but the circumstances made that he went back to his nature later on in his life. And while he was traveling through Central America, he landed in a project called Rancho Masastal and managed a farm there for 9 years when he became proficient in permaculture and syntropic ag. And 16 years ago, he organized his first agroforestry course. And down the line, he ended up starting his own company called Provenir Design, with which he consults and does installs and managements for clients in Costa Rica and other places in South America, if I'm not
Central America,
confused. Central
mostly.
America, yes. And he's done a lot of advanced courses with Brazilian syntropic practitioners. And recently, him and his partner, they got themselves a land in southern Italy and they installed their first Mediterranean syntropic system, which is about 2,000 square meters. And yeah, he's just dabbling into a totally different climate now compared to tropical Central America. And yes, Scott, is there anything you'd like to add before we go into the questions?
Well, I think you're curious who my famous popcorn relative is, and his name's Orville Redenbacher, my mom's grandpa. So it's a famous popcorn brand, and he was successful at hybridizing a popping corn where like almost all of the kernels popped. And that was his like he was an agronomist and a farmer, and that was his like invention. And went into business with his buddy and made popcorn. And yeah, I got to know him. He passed away maybe when I want to say like 8 years old, but was a great human. And there's still commercials of him that like air in the United States promoting the brand. It's very interesting. It's now owned by like a giant horrible ag corporation. I don't recommend you eat it. I'm sure it's gross chemicals on it.
That's usually what happens after.
It's
Um,
exactly what happens. Yeah.
right. Well, maybe some of you that are listening from the US would know about him. Yeah, let's just jump into the questions then.
Cool.
So this is one of the questions I ask in all interviews because I find like there's always a different response to that. What what made you nerd on syntropic ag over other practices for planting?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I was already like deep in the world of agroforestry, like planting tree rows of acacias every meter with some fruit trees scattered, but there wasn't like any patterning to it beyond very basic things. And when I finally like touched into the world of syntropy, I felt like there was like both a logic and an eloquence to it that really like pulled at me, where I could both see like the structure of this that could be scaled, that could be like mechanized compared to like kind of the food foresty stuff I was in at the time, which was great. And we still do stuff like that, but it felt very, I don't know, a little hippie. I'm a hippie, so I can say that. So it had this structure to it, Syntropic does, but then there was also like this eloquence, this like intuition of like at a certain point you just got to put the plants in the ground and you see what happens and you observe and you are playful with it. And so I think that it holds those two things in balance really nicely, really, really struck me. And then I think like I haven't really dabbled into worlds like market gardening and some of these other practices. I've always been on the periphery of my world, but it's just working with trees is just the most beautiful, like rewarding thing. And so getting to plant trees is always it's a little bit like the famous Kentucky poet Wendell Berry says, it's like solving for pattern. It's like the single act that addresses so many problems, environmental, social, economic, et cetera, at the same time. And so syntropic farming like really, really kind of kept me along that path of working with trees, with tree crops. And yeah, I think that's what really like, yeah, Agancharro like grabbed me. Yeah.
Right, right. I see. I mean, I guess, yeah, that's the thing. Like most people come from a sort of hippie place with permaculture, and then they figure out it doesn't work so well because there's a lot of failures and a lot of plants that end up dying and etc. And it's messy to manage, and there's a lot of grasses coming in, etc. And then people just figure out that there's a much more systematic approach to it and making it in lines and choosing the right support species and being like not, oh, I'm planting this support species there and then another one 5 meters away. No, you're planting the same, and it's a pattern that is replicating itself. I find that
Yeah.
that's usually what people find. And
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think that like I don't know, right now it feels syntropic farming is very popular, like de moda. But I think that's because it works. Like that's often for me, that's a sign. I guess things these days can get riled up on social media, so you don't really know like what's working and what's not. It's a little bit tricky. And how we define the idea of work, like what's successful, that's a whole conversation. But I think, yeah, I really resonate with what you said. Like right now I'm sitting in a like there's an orchard, it's going this way. It's like kind of on lines, like scattered fruit trees with bananas. And somebody called it syntropic. Like I think our Wi-Fi network's called Syntropia. The owners here were renting and they didn't know. And the guy who installed didn't really know. And it's just kind of like a disorganized food forest. And it's just there.
yeah.
Some things grow, some things don't. Like I stole some bananas this morning. It was great. But it lacks an oomph to it and a purpose to it that I really think that's why people are excited about syntropic farming and why, for me, if I wouldn't have come across it, I can imagine my permaculture career would have like, I would have focused on something else. Like, all right, I'm going to be focused on ponds or focused on natural building or something within the giant umbrella of permaculture. Because I probably would have run into a roadblock in the food forest realm of just being like, I don't know about this. Like it's not working. I'm not confident in telling people to do this, at least how I was previously doing it. And really since embracing syntropic farming, it's kind of crazy to see some of the results we get. And you know, we're not like commercial farmers working, like we can tell you about our projects and all that stuff, but results in many senses of that word and people being really happy with what's happening on the land compared to, yeah, what they were doing before.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, the truth is with permaculture plantings, it doesn't have to be like that, but most of the time they're quite random. So really,
So
it would help us. It would help us there if you could summarize and like systematize Syntropic Ag in 5 minutes. I know that you are like
Okay.
you've been teaching that for a while. So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
could just condense it down in like 5 minutes so
Okay,
people can
let's see.
understand.
You put the timer on. It fits within permaculture, first of all, because it's a food growing methodology. So if we're looking at a piece of land and we're trying to decide, hey, we want to grow food, we have this whole grab bag of methodologies we could pick from, like biodynamic farming to market gardening to all sorts of types of agroforestry. And I think Syntropic is in that bag. If you are in a context where you want to eat from trees or you want to produce a commercial crop from trees, I think syntropic farming should be at like the forefront of your mind. I think if you're in a context of highly degraded soils, I think syntropic farming can be very powerful in that context. There's times when I don't recommend it, which we'll probably talk about later in this call. And so it's an agroforestry method. And what makes it unique compared to very simple agroforestry systems? Like here we have, you know, shade grown coffee, single species of overstory tree with coffee monoculture underneath. What makes it unique compared to that is, for me, really the density at which we plant. And the diversity as well, but I find the diversity, especially here in the tropics and amongst like-minded people is easy to arrive at the amount of diversity we need. It's not so hard to grasp that as if we're coming from a permaculture background. But the density, the sheer quantity of plants we will put in a square meter, and all we're doing is allowing the plants to like live out the full expression of their life while we're observing them. And we're really leveraging two main ecological processes. We're leveraging succession and we're leveraging photosynthesis. And we're just like, there's a phrase you'll hear, you're just trying to put the right plant in the right place at the right time. And that requires some study, requires some observation. Maybe you're calling your buddy who's been doing this longer. You're reading a book. You do your best, and then you see what happens. And so you're really in observation, and you're letting these plants work together to create new microclimates and cycle water more efficiently and create, roots at different soil horizons, all these things, some which we can see, some we can't see. And the beauty of this, if it's done well, is that we get a yield from the system like right away, maybe day 30, like you get radishes coming out of the system, or maybe it's month 4 and you get sweet potatoes or something like that. But you're getting a yield from the very beginning until years down the road. And so you're going from, in the tropics here, we're going to harvest sweet potatoes at 3 months. We'll start harvesting malanga at 5 months, yucca at 9 months, ginger at a year, pineapple at a year and a half, bananas at 2 years, cacao at 3 years, and fruit trees at 5 years, nut trees at 8 years. And so we're both able to, like, from a farming perspective, help someone to plant a forest because they're able to pay for that forest with these early yields, but then also just like have yield for ourselves if it's more like a homestead context. And that yield is so motivating. It's so important. Like if you just go put that, I don't know, that nut tree out there and you're just waiting for like 8 years and you have to weed trim around it for, I don't know, here in the tropics, like 4 times a year for 8 years, and maybe you'll get a nut. It's like, well, why can't that weed trimming work, which is kind of our tool of choice here that we hate and we love? Instead of that, why can't I be, pruning things and harvesting things? And maybe it's the same amount of labor, maybe it's a little bit more, but I'm getting a yield from it. And so that's kind of the process and philosophy behind syntropic farming. It's really what we'd classify as a process-based agriculture versus an input-based agriculture. And there's many other agricultural methodologies like that, but it fits in that camp. We're trying to leverage ecological processes, so food web processes, photosynthesis, succession, in order to get a productive farm that's often based on trees and fruit and nut coming from trees. There's my version of kind of what is syntropic farming.
Well, you did pretty well. We can clearly see that you've been doing this you've been teaching for a while. We can see that. That's well done.
I try to, I like the act of trying to keep things concise and communicate complex ideas with coherency, which I don't know, sometimes it's hard to do.
Yeah, definitely. With this practice, it's pretty difficult, but yeah, well done. Well, I'm wondering what your backgrounds with economics, actually, because that's pretty interesting to dive into. How do you think like that syntropic ag could fit in like the current economic system, or does it need a change? Like, can you expand on that?
Yeah, so I'm trained as an economist. I did not practice, thank goodness. I mostly trained in econometrics, which was like statistical regression analysis of large database sets. And I've forgotten most of that, but I learned how to use Microsoft Excel basically. And how I think it fits into the current like ag world. Um, I think that, like, to step back, I think our current ag system is failing. I don't think that's a particularly controversial opinion. And I view things like syntropic farming as attempts at a new paradigm of agriculture. one that's based on our participation, one that's based on perennials, one that's based on ecology. And we often in permaculture, we talk about like parallel economies. So we could think of this like parallel agricultures. We need syntropic farming to both work within this current system we live in that is like a falling apart polycrisis. And simultaneously, we need it to lead us to what we want in the future. And that's a very hard thing to do, to like be both of those, to work today, but also to work 20 years from now or 30 years from now, or help people get to that. I think it fits within the paradigm today, really in the sense that I think at its, I find it to be very appropriately scaled. I think there's opportunities for syntropic farming to be very large scale, but that might take a long time. It requires like development of markets and machinery, and there's people working on those things. And you can apply it also to like a small backyard space, but it really fits, I think, very nicely at that like 1,000 square meter to 2 hectare scale. I don't know, something maybe 10 hectares. It depends on where you are in the world. And so it's a very human scale. And I think it's very empowering in that sense. And there's so much evidence out there that I don't know any of the numbers, but that the majority of the world's food is produced on small scale farms still today. And so to be within that scale, the human scale, human velocity, I think is really an advantage that Syntropic has. That's where I find it to be most powerful. And then I think it also faces the reality that like, I don't know if there's any farms that are truly profitable in our current model, our current economic model. Like as soon as you take into account externalities, fossil fuels, government subsidies, like Europe, I know nothing about the subsidies there, but my understanding is that it's like can be up to 50% of the average farmer's income. Like that was a number someone told me. And so it's like, whoa, it's impossible to compare a syntropic farm that's getting, I don't know, maybe zero subsidies to a giant, I don't know, hemp farm somewhere that's getting, 60% of their costs reimbursed. I don't know how European subsidies work. They confuse me. But so we're in this game that we can't win at. You compare, the research and investment into any regenerative ag practices compared to conventional practice. It's an impossible number to compare. And so I really think we have to be like, you live in that world a little bit, but we have to be like really dreaming of this other world we want to be in. And I remember having an interview with somebody a few years back who has like an investment fund in regenerative ag and was talking about scale. And, maybe this is an idea more coming from my permaculture background, but I think it applies to syntropic farming. Like I'm not so interested in scaling up syntropic farms. Like that would be cool to see the 500 hectare syntropic farm. Like that would be a dream in many ways. But I truly believe the scale that's going to work for us is by having more syntropic farms. So more people doing it. And that I think is how we will maybe as a collective, kind of weather the current storm, ag, economic, loss of rural culture, et cetera, that many of us are working within. So that's a little bit of my perspective, I think, how it fits like within everything that we face today. But I think it's really interesting conversations around scale. And I'm there's a lot of workshops on syntropic farming, and there's I think sometimes people are like, oh, everyone's teaching syntropic farming and not practicing. And this is a conversation that's happened in permaculture for many years. And I think there's perhaps validity to that. And like, I want more people doing this. So I hope people keep teaching and we keep spreading the word. And some of those students are going to take this and run with it and do things that are far better than ourselves and move this further along. And so that's really the kind of, yeah, my perspective on that and how we, I don't know, how we face all of this, the economic component of this.
Mm. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I've been asked like a month ago by someone who was just a student of a friend of mine, and she was asking how how does it compare in terms of profitability compared to, like, let's say we planted a half an hectare Syntropic almond grove compared to over there a big almond plantation that is probably on more than 30 hectares, something like that could be. And it's really difficult to answer that question, right? Because they are using certain products that will also make it more profitable and less disease and etc. that ends up happening. But at the same time, they might end up because of the monoculture with certain disease that they can't even like handle, like the wood borer for like all these all the stone fruit,
Yeah.
the flat how is it called? It's a really difficult word. The flats
No
the
say.
stone fruit flat-headed
Uh-huh.
wood borer. Yeah, it's called
Okay,
that,
there you go.
for
Nice,
example.
nice.
And I've heard that from like a conventional farmer here that he's got a big problem with a certain variety of almonds. And it depends on the moisture that he gets this year. Sometimes erosion comes into account and it destroys everything. As you say, externalities. For example, I saw as well an olive grove that is like really close to me here, like about 500 meters away, with a lot of olives that just blew over because of the crazy storms and
The
the
wind.
rain that came with it.
Aye,
If it
wow.
was syntropic, there would have been a windbreak, which would not have made that happen. There would have been grass. So that changes everything, really. So in reality, it's really difficult to have like
It's
measurements.
so difficult to
It's really crazy,
compare.
yeah.
Maybe in Brazil, where they've been doing this for 30 years, 40 years, like they have that type of information, and you see studies that come out now and then. But I think, and I like this last example you gave, like that comparison of a conventional olive to syntropic olive, like in perfect conditions, probably a conventional farm is going to be more profitable. But when are we ever in perfect conditions? One, it's a commodity crop. There's drought, there's flood. Like, as soon as there's that like ideal is disrupted, then the syntropic system is going to do better by so many other metrics. And I appreciate people that are like trying to measure these things. I think we need that. And I don't want to get I don't live in a world where that's like the only indicator of success of these systems. I want to also have indicators around like, is it beautiful? Do I love working in this? Do I get joy from it? Do other people, are they attracted to it? Does it bring life to a space? And I don't feel motivated to try to count those things. And it needs to probably pay for itself. And most of our clients want their projects to break even, and I can't guarantee that ever. I usually think it'll most likely happen if the client is like awesome at what they do. But if they're lazy, okay,
Yeah,
what's going to happen?
it's not in your control.
It's not, yeah, exactly. And that's one of the pitfalls of being a consultant
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
benefits. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, at least you don't take the responsibility for the mistakes, at least. But
you
well,
you
yeah,
take less, yeah, but then you don't also, you see these things you put your heart and soul into
yeah,
for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and you walk away, and sometimes it crumbles when you're gone.
yeah,
You're like, is that my fault? Is that not? No
yeah.
say
I mean, in
they're tricky
truth, I
things.
think the only metric that we can be sure of is that the land will be regenerated, and that's because support species don't fail like fruit trees. I mean,
Yeah,
it's very rare that the support species fails, and you can always replant one if there's a problem by seed. So I
yep.
find here, especially here in Andalusia and in the Mediterranean in general, the semi-arid Mediterranean is the worst. Well, that we can guarantee that we're gonna get a better soil out of this, more protection, less oxidation during the summer, which is a big deal here,
Hmm.
which actually destroys soil. And yeah, that we can be sure of. So there's something about it that we know is going to work through generations. So it means even if a crop fails down the line, you can always plant another crop in it, and the fertility will be improved. So that's something I kind of use as an example before. It's like, yeah, you could plant olives, almonds, carobs, let's say, at first. But then down the line, let's say 50, 60 years, I mean, let's say there's a problem and then it doesn't produce anymore. Well, by that time, you'd be able to actually plant a crop that requires more fertility. Let's say, I don't know, persimmon, peach, something like that.
Yeah.
And we just know that that's going to work better for that tree. And we know that in general, we're going to attract more biodiversity and all that. And in the end, it's going to be a much more sustainable farming, because at the end of the day as well, if you do your veggie beds in between and all that as well, you're going to benefit more from that. And in the Mediterranean, it's huge. Like tomatoes that are shaded over tomatoes that are in full sun in 45-degree heat, you see a massive difference with that. And I've already seen it. So it's that's the only real metric that we can be sure of: regeneration of soil. And that is actually, the truth is like actually that our crops come from the fertility of our soil. They come from soil. So at the end of the day, I know that conventional ag makes it seem like it doesn't come from soil. It comes from like products and all that. But in truth, it's always been working like that, that the natural world like relies on soil, on the goodness of soil to actually produce. So that's the only thing we can measure, kind of, and even can't really measure it clearly, but it's sure that it's above like the conventional approaches.
Yeah, and I think that's like, if you're thinking about starting this work on your own land or with a client, like I think it's an important conversation to have, just to keep expectations realistic. And it's a great question. Like if all this does is like regenerates your soil and builds you a forest and you get some yield from it and takes some work for sure. But if that's all it does, but it's going to do more than that, we hope, is that enough for you? And I think for a lot of people that will be enough for them. And that might be what we have to start with anyway. If you're someone who's pioneering this in the Mediterranean, I don't know, there's maybe 50 people similar to yourself throughout the world in the Mediterranean climate, that have been at this for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. There's people like myself who are just starting in the Mediterranean. I'm like a second wave person in there. I get to read all the articles and get the species list. I get to cheat, go visit Amadeco and mark library and see what they're doing. And then I hope someone who comes to my land in 5 years sees what I'm doing, and whatever they do is that much better. And we get more information and we build like that and we grow like that. And I think that's really the only way to like guarantee success.
Yeah. Success is a difficult metric because it's a lot of things, as you say, joy in doing that, regeneration of soil, crops, I don't know, shading, biodiversity. I mean, there's just so many things. But at the end of the day, like the main thing that people want is for it to produce, which makes total sense, especially if you have a productive goal in it that is not just for your homestead.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's also true that realize that sometimes without the crops themselves, for some people it's enough, especially if you have, let's say, if you can propagate your own trees in your greenhouse or whatever, much cheaper. So you could still do it. And management, to be honest, I mean, I know in your climate it takes much more time, but here in the Mediterranean, it's not that crazy. To be honest, it's not that crazy.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
I get back in let's see, 7 weeks, and I'm hoping it's not too crazy.
Honestly, yeah, it does help if you're on a big scale having a tractor and all that. But in reality, if you have the right tools for the right job, it doesn't take that long, and you could just fly through it. I don't see really the problem for myself.
You're still young though, man.
Yeah.
It helps.
Yeah, it does as well. And of course, it will change down the line. Like when you have to prune trees or higher up, of course, there's some of that in there. It's a bit different, but the Mediterranean climate's so slow that in reality, it's not that crazy, honestly. Like people get so overwhelmed by the amount of work, but it's because they see the Brazilians. They see the Brazilians and the subtropics and the tropics. It's totally different,
Totally different, yeah. Someone once compared it to, maybe it was Joao from Cito Semente in a course I did with him. He said, like, well, if you look at planting carrots, like you have to weed carrots like 4 times three times maybe before you harvest carrots in an organic carrot farm. And so that's so much work. Like, annual vegetables are so much work. You have to be on top of them. You're doing all this stuff and you get a quick yield. So you're getting faster feedback with slower feedback in syntropic farming, which can be frustrating. Sometimes you're doing a lot of work and you're just waiting. You're waiting. You're hoping that the cacao does well or the persimmon does well or whatever it is. But all agriculture is a lot of work. Anybody that thinks otherwise, and I think probably one of the things I just started this online course with the second cohort, and it's an interesting thing because people are always asking how much man hours to manage whatever case study we're looking at, or how many workers does it require? And sometimes we have that information and we share it, and you're trying to simultaneously like not scare people from this, but also being realistic that, yeah, this isn't like you just put the things in the ground and walk away. And I think that's one of the fallacies of permaculture, probably one of the like primary critiques of like Bill Mollison's and his introduction of this idea of food forests to the world, borrowed from such brilliant indigenous agriculture, was very much like, you plant your fruit trees, you go in the hammock, and then you eat the fruit. And sometimes that works for people. They have great soil, their context works, they pick the right species, but most of the time it doesn't work that way. And so I would rather be in this world where we're putting more effort in and we're getting more yield. It's a higher input in terms of our management, our observation, but we get a higher yield from it. And in syntropic farming, I think is a nice balance in that.
Yeah, I get that point. There's this Fukuoka idea that you just like, leave things and then it's going to be fine. But if you do that in our soil, you're not going to get anything. And certainly not. You need to add irrigation. You need to do so many things. It doesn't really work like that. And
I think there's places in the world. I think there's climates in the world where like the moisture is great and the elevation just right, so the temperatures are perfect. And where maybe it's less. And we have projects that have amazing volcanic soil.
Yeah.
You can kind of just put things in the ground and walk away, and they grow really well.
That's definitely not average. That's definitely not average.
Not average. Yeah, exactly. No, it's great though. It's really nice.
Well, what I would like to share here is actually that would tie in to the idea of being realistic for stuff, because that's really important. And on top of that as well, saying that there's less work to be done in certain areas actually of farming with Syntropic. So the thing is, we planted a bed of lettuces under like a line of castor oil. We had tomatoes growing there before, so we just cut them down, added lettuces there. And I realized like 1 month down the line, okay, the lettuces hadn't grown that much, but it's because we also had a lot of rain and not much sun. So that's also one of the externalities. But no weeds were showing up. No weeds whatsoever. Whereas like a lettuce bed like that we had up there that wasn't syntropic, plenty of weeds. Probably had to weed it twice, and it's starting to be annoying because you get this really annoying grass, sort of like similar to couch grass, something like that. And yes, I mean, down the line with all that rain, what ended up happening is that the slugs absolutely destroyed the lettuces. That's what happens when you don't. I mean, this is the amount of rain. It's unprecedented what we had.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been talking with a local here. He's never seen that in his entire life, this amount of rain in a go. Plenty of basements got flooded and etc. And they're quite crazy. But yeah, that tells you really about, to be realistic about that. Yeah, okay, the lettuces, maybe they'll regrow, but we won't get that much out of it. And but yeah, at the end of the day, the amount of weeding that it is, if they would have worked, that's like nothing. So really, a lot of like market gardening work is actually weeding. So at the end of the day, it's like it prevents you from doing certain works. It prevents you from bending down on the ground and weeding, which is absolutely horrible for the back and for like, it's so annoying really to be doing this. But yes, at the end of the day, we also need to be quite realistic with this. But also with Syntropic Ag, if we do our, let's say, our tree lines, and in between you got the typical Brazilian thing of like 3 market beds in between. with this amount of space, you can produce so much more. And if one crop fails, okay, it's not that big of a deal at the end of the day. So it's just creating this diversity there. And if you kind of hire different people that are good at different things, so let's say someone who's like an agroforester, another one who's good with animals, another one who's a market gardener within the same land, in reality, you could produce not more than 10 times more than what we produce on the land in the world. I mean, much more than that, actually, in reality. We could feed 100 million people. I mean, I truly believe that could be a number that could be achieved.
I mean, I think you're hitting like a key piece there is like, I don't know, there's a brilliant like world that combines market gardening with like holistic management and syntropic farming and then finding people who have those skill sets and can work together. That's I think it's a dream of many projects and places. I think it's hard that a single person can know all of that. Maybe on a smaller scale. And there's probably people out there figuring it out and that are just dedicated in a way that I know I'm too lazy. I don't know, it's just like too much information to get really good at all of that. Who knows? Maybe my life will bring animals into my life from market gardening. But I think one of the pieces that I find really important is not being dogmatic in this.
Yeah.
And which sometimes I feel from some practitioners, some teachers I've had, I felt they were very dogmatic. And as soon as like another methodology or idea was brought into the conversation, like, syntropic farming, it's the only way. And it's like, I don't know. And I think for many people, they have to take the best of all of these and bring them together to fit their needs, their context. But I think on that vein of like being realistic, like there's great potential in this. And what I really find with syntropic farming is if an individual is really genuinely able to put all of the principles together and like work with the principles and really have the density, the diversity, then my experience is these work really well. As soon as somebody starts being a little bit lazy, or maybe lazy is not the right word. I don't know, you get busy, you're not able to do it. Like I'll give you an example. Our system in Italy, the like edges of the beds were supposed to be filled with fava beans. It's like 15 beds. I was able to do the first 3, and then I had to leave for Costa Rica. So the 12 other beds never got the fava beans. So we'll see what they look like. It's missing a niche. So there was, guess what? More weeds, more work, etc. It was poor planning on my part. You know, it was my first time doing this in that climate. Things that happen that are going to happen. Even if I had 10 years experience, it's going to happen because life happens. But I do really feel that, and my experience tells me that if you're really diligent about staying on top of the principles and meeting the principles, then this works. And I think that then speaks a lot to being on the appropriate scale, understanding your capacity, not like it was probably dumb for me to do 2,000 square meters like right away. Probably should have done 500. But, you know, I have some experience. I kind of know what I'm doing at the same time. So we went for it. And 2,000 isn't crazy big, but, you know, it keep you busy. So I think that's a really important thing for people to consideration, for people to consider, just like starting small and like learning that process, trying to do a small space really well and understanding that in a small space, like being really diligent before leaping into something bigger. And that act alone will probably do more for people's expectations and their understanding of what these systems require than anything I could ever say in a course or in a video ever.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, the truth is, like, I've heard people say before, Syntropic Ag doesn't work. And I heard that before. The truth is, it doesn't work because there's not the skill or the context is not really taken into account properly. But if it is taken into account properly, and if we split the responsibilities, let's say, between the market gardener, agroforester, and the animal guy, in truth, I don't see why it wouldn't work. And that's it. I mean, definitely, and all three would actually benefit from that. Like in the Mediterranean climate, the market gardener
so
will
much.
definitely benefit from like for the summer crops to have a bit of shade if it's well managed, the tree lines. The tree farmer will definitely get more fertility in the ground and less pests and all that will affect the crops because of all the diversity. And then the animal guy will definitely get more grass. I mean, that's what's going to happen, and that we know it happens. That is for sure. The truth is, like, we haven't optimized yet all of these processes properly.
Yeah.
So that's really the thing that we know it works. So let's make it and optimize it. And that's really important, because I see as well exactly the dogmatism you're talking about that actually creates such ideas for people that Syntropic Ag doesn't work, because someone telling you there's only one way to do it, but that's not true. There's so many different ways. I mean, you can make one bed, you could make 3 lines in one bed if you want. You could do so many things. You could make it much wider for animals. You could figure out a way so you can harvest with nets like olives, almonds, etc. There's ways of figuring out which bushes would work below that you can prune and resprout once you've done the harvest, for example, or etc. And that's the thing. It's like there's clearly ways to make this work, and that's really clear. And the way that lands are optimized at the moment, they're really not optimized, especially in the Mediterranean. People plant trees, let's say olive trees, 15 meter by 15 meter. I've already seen that. And they have this idea of like competition and all that. But in reality, I mean, they're tough trees, and they're going to be fine with the much closer spacing. And then they till the soil, you know. So in truth, if you till the soil here, you're not getting any animals here. You're not getting any feed from that.
You guys
It's
love
ridiculous.
tilling the soil there.
Yeah,
It's
they
pretty.
love
It's
they love
like
it. Huh?
they love it. Oh man.
It's horrible.
I'm still like wrapping my head around
Yeah,
the deep cultural need to till the soil. And I get it for fire protection, and there's like reasons I can understand, but it's also just the most classic like negative feedback loop you could
yeah, and it's
imagine, where it
expensive.
just
It's expensive. I mean, it's clearly more expensive than cutting grass or
yeah.
getting animals. Getting animals will be the cheapest way. But like in truth, it's it's a sort of like, how would I say? There's a little bit of a superstition here. I think that like literally that you would put the
100%.
grass into the ground and that will increase the fertility. Like they think that, but that doesn't work like that. And at the end of the day, you end up with soil that has nothing. Like, I mean, I was on the olive monoculture the other day, 20 centimeters onto bedrock. It was so eroded. And like, I was like, how does these olives even manage to actually produce? It's impossible.
They're very generous, the olive
Yeah.
trees. It's kind of
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. It's quite amazing, but it's, definitely. I mean, you realize that if we were to first off regenerate our soils with this practice, there's so much more land that will be arable and we'd be able to produce with it. And that's the truth. Is a lot of places that don't have that possibility now because we don't see the potential. The only potential for them is if we had plenty of products and of compost and manure and etc. Which again, it doesn't matter if it's organic or not. It's still input from the outside, and you're depleting someone's land for your own land to get better. So at the end of the day, it's still not process oriented. It's more like input oriented. So yeah, I mean, it's just incredible what just having trees in a certain spot where they don't really go so well. They don't like they don't seed on their own. Like for example, here it doesn't happen. Like it doesn't happen in a like clear in let's say a big field that there's a tree coming up. That doesn't happen.
Right.
It's not like a savanna ecosystem. It doesn't happen, you know. In the semi-arid climate like that, we just don't have the species for it. They need a bit of shade, you know, to really start coming. And just adding like a little bush or a little tree makes a massive difference.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like 10 to 20
you
times.
see under the spiky wild pear.
Yeah,
just the little things coming up. Like, oh, that's an oak. That's a wild olive, and it's been so much fun for me to dip into this new climate. Really from like have these beginner eyes. And we did our quick call check-in the other day, and I was saying like it's given me a lot of empathy for our clients here in Costa Rica, where like I've been here 17 years, and so you forget what people don't know, and like that they don't know how to harvest a banana properly, which for me is at this point very second nature. And you can judge people and you're like, oh my goodness, what are they doing on their land? They're burning all the X, Y, Z. And then I, pop over to Southern Italy and I'm just like, what do I do with these, all this extra wood material from the pruning? All my neighbors say to burn it. Do I chip it? And you just don't know until you're in it and asking questions and having those conversations. And so having that beginner's lens is something I would, really encourage anyone that's embarking on syntropic farming to have. I find that a lot of us from the permaculture background, we've been like studying food forests for years or whatever, and we think that a food forest is equivalent to syntropic farming. And there's plenty of parallels. There's quite a big overlap, but there's such distinct differences. And I was talking with a farm manager the other day on a project pretty close to here that we're helping on, and he's like, "Yeah, I've installed syntropic farms all over northern Costa Rica, and I know this isn't true. Like it's tiny country. We kind of know what's going on, and I know what he's saying is that he's done permaculture farms,
Yeah.
whatever that means. Even that's a giant, again, kind of umbrella of a word. And so coming back, like I think it's really valuable if you are entering into this, whether you have 20 years as a professional orchardist or 10 years working like your beautiful permaculture homestead, to really come at it from a beginner's perspective and try to like enter into it like I've had this chance to in Southern Italy, of like, I know nothing. What do I do now? And build upon that. And I think it's one of the great tools that we get offered occasionally in our life to drop back into that. So that would be my encouragement to anyone listening to this.
Sure. Well, makes me want to dive in a bit more in how you deal with clients, because actually that's the thing with the different levels of complexity of syntropic agroforestry. Like there's let's say the farming that is more principled on syntropic agroforestry, and there's a true syntropic agroforestry. And obviously, true syntropic agroforestry, which is very complex, can put a lot of people off. So I'm truly wondering how you deal with these different levels that people have about like the consciousness of the syntropic farming. How do you deal with them, and how do you let's say make it more complex for certain and then make it less complex for others? Can you like tell us a bit more about this?
It really is client per client, like case by case basis. And I think this is the strength of permaculture. Then we're in this site analysis, we're in the client interview, we're understanding where the client's coming from, what are their great desires from this. So like I can give you some examples. We did an 800 square meter syntropic garden with a client who took some of our courses, and we went like perfect syntropic, like, and I talked with him so many times, and I understood like he knows what he's doing. He's a plant person. He just needed a little bit of guidance on species selection, where to get stuff. And it was like, all right, go. And I pushed him into it and he's running with it. It's amazing. I love to go and check it out. And so I understood in his case that he loves being in the garden. He has experience being in the garden. The scale was appropriate. And so it's like, go full syntropic. Another client around that same time, Northern Costa Rica, commercial cacao farm. Starting, they already have a chocolate brand where they buy from other farmers. They bought land to start growing their own cacao. They don't live there. They would like to one day. They don't really speak Spanish. They would like to one day. Their farm manager is like a local guy who has his own cacao farm. He's mostly organic, but I don't think he's you talk to people. I think Mediterranean might be similar, where it's like, yeah, we're organic, and then you see them applying a little herbicide on the side of the road. You're like, maybe not. And in that case, they were like, oh, we want to be syntropic, and I'm like, I don't think you do. Like we're talking like planting 8 hectares in 1 year, or far from anything. It's a place that's just like very isolated. It's low education levels amongst the workers. The farm manager is someone in that case that they were really relying on for the project. And if he wasn't happy, it could have led to challenges for the project. And just talking with him, he was like, this is how I grow cacao. I grow it organically. This is how I do it. And I looked at them and I was like, guys, you just have to do what he knows. Like, we could encourage things, but he needs to be able to run with this and get it done. And fortunately, in that case, there's amazing water. You don't need to irrigate there. It's pretty good soil. It's a culture of cacao. And so there wasn't really any reason, in my perspective, to plant syntropically, unless they would have had clear market opportunities or needs for other crops, like short rotation crops. But they weren't set up for that, to develop those markets, to find the workers. They didn't have any infrastructure on site. And so it didn't make any sense to do that. And so I think those are two good examples. We have a project closer to here where it's an old food forest, not that old, but it just hasn't grown at all in like 3 or 4 years. It's a much tougher climate, very rocky, gets really dried out. We get these seasonal winds that are trade winds that come over from across the Atlantic. They can even bring the sands from the Sahara. And so it's really struggling. And they approached us. They're like, we would like to make this work. They're like, it's not doing very well. What do we do? And in that context, I think syntropic farming is going to be excellent. I think it's going to help with these drought conditions. It's going to create windbreaks. It's going to help. They need more density. It's a climate where we want anti-evaporation strategies. We want trees stacked upon trees, stacked upon trees. Compared to this cacao farm in the north of Costa Rica, it's actually extremely wet. They get flooding there. It's super humid. Airflow's as important as anything else in that climate. They're almost in like a cloud forest like area, so they get actually less sunlight than one would expect for the tropics. And so it's really this analysis, and even with this project here that we're going to convert, that I think should be syntropic farming, training the workers on this will be a big challenge. Making sure everyone's on board. Like, we're going to go and plant Mombasa grass. They have to understand now that you have to cut this every 21 days, maybe 2 months during lower times of year. And I can explain all of that, but until they're in it and we're able to monitor it, we don't know how they'll do. And I've seen them succeed at some other projects. There's a very good market garden, which is hard to do here. I'm like, if they can do that, this should be easy. So that's my hope. So this is a bit of the process we always are going through with clients, and kind of, it's just like a filtering. We're just like sifting to see what type of agroforestry system makes sense for them.
Yeah, that really points out to the fact that, syntropic farming doesn't work in every context. I mean, and the human context is actually the most important in a way, because any ecosystem would definitely enjoy having syntropic farming there, for sure, obviously. But if you don't have the skill, if you don't have the education levels, if it's not really understood, all these different principles, I mean, it's just going to fail. I mean, that's just what it is, right?
It's going to fail. Someone's going to see it, and somebody's like, yeah, this is the syntropic farm. It never did anything. And well, that doesn't benefit anyone. They just wasted like $4,000 on plants and a tractor or whatever, in renting equipment things. And that's not good for anyone.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a friend of mine who's been farming for like maybe 8 years in New Caledonia, close to close to New Zealand. And I mean, he basically breaks it down into 3 different types of agroforestry. So the first one is a simple. So imagine just a shade tree on like coffee plantation. The other one would be more moderate. So let's say 2 support species, something like that. Maybe a sort of polyculture thing going on, like pineapple and citrus, something like that. Let's say, with 1 or 2 other support species. And then he's got like the complex, or the more like syntropic really farming, where that's really the full-blown syntropic farming. And in truth, it's very helpful to break it down like that, because again, if you don't break it down like that, you fall into dogma, and then you're just like, oh, there's only that way that works. But in truth, it doesn't work like that. It depends of the level of education of that person, the amount of time that person has, and truly what they want at the end of the day. And if they're not into wanting to regenerate their soil and all that, maybe they just want the best that they can get with to get a little bit more of a crop, for example. I mean, in truth, you cannot force people into regenerating their land. That's not something that you can do. And
Totally, yeah.
yeah.
This property right here is interesting. It's that exact middle ground. It's like bananas,
Mhm.
fruit trees, and then Tithonia, Mexican sunflower.
Yeah.
And then there's like some random shade trees that are already here. So it's like four elements. That's it. Yalla. And they get some bananas. Like a third of the fruit trees have grown well. Two-thirds are just kind of there, about the same size as 3 years ago. Probably not really regenerating the soil. It doesn't cost them that much to do anything. And so probably like every 3 months we have a conversation where they're like, should we do something more? Like, should we plant more, make it denser, be more active in here? And it's always this trade-off. It's like, well, do you want to spend more money or time, whatever it is? And it will do better. It'll create more life. There'll be more biomass, more diversity, higher yield, or just keep it as it is and see what works. And it's kind of moving along. It's not great. They're not super happy with it. And they haven't made the decision of which way to go. And it's an interesting conversation. I think it's a very real one that probably a lot of people can relate to on projects around the world.
Yeah, definitely. Also, we have to understand a bigger scale. Simplifying is always the kind of way. I mean, you can have your fruit trees and your emergent strata and then your low strata kind of thing. But if you have too much complexity, it's going to be impossible to manage. And just got to systemize the whole thing basically. But yeah, makes me think. So, how would you tie up syntropic ag within permaculture design in general?
Yeah, our team at Porta, we are permaculture designers. That's like the main thing we do. And for those who don't know what that means, it can mean many things, but in our context, we do like whole site planning and design. So someone will hire us, or we'll do this on our own land, and we're mapping out everything that's happening on this in a place, historical land use patterns, what's going on with neighbors, like things outside of our boundaries. So we're looking at the watershed, the bioregion, historical wind and climate patterns. We're exploring the topography, the geology. It's a very broad where we're touching upon all of these subjects. We're not geologists, we're not soil scientists, we're not hydrologists, but we know a little bit about each of those things. And eventually, within that big analysis, we arrive at growing food. And syntropic farming, I think, fits for me within the larger umbrella of permaculture design. And so I think it fits really nicely in what we would call in permaculture zone 2 or zone 3. And so zones are a design methodology that allow us to look at something like a chicken system or an orchard or we're about to do a natural swimming pool over here and say how much maintenance does that need? How often does it give us a yield? What is the frequency of use? That's a common phrase we'll use. And so that then helps us determine like, hey, how close should this be to my kitchen or to my bedroom or to my parking? And we do this whole game where we're moving things around the site to understand where to build them, plant them, dig them, etc. And so I think Syntropic fits really nicely in not so much right next to the house, where I think it might make more sense to have a veggie garden, edible landscaping, chickens for some eggs, especially in the homestead context. But it fits really nicely a little bit further away. And so if it's more of if you're designing more for a market garden where you're getting vegetables, you want this to be pretty close to your home. If you're designing for like long-term giant nut trees, you probably want it a little bit further away from your home. And there's some points of tension in there that are kind of interesting, because we know in syntropic farming that after that first year or few years, depending on the design, we're often not growing vegetables anymore. There's no, they've fulfilled their purpose in the system. The succession has moved forward. There's now too much shade. And we could arrive again through a big disturbance. We could plant veggies again and be focused on that. But what often happens is then you move the veggies to somewhere else. And so, for example, we were at Fazenda Orofino, which is maybe the oldest, most impressive syntropic farm in Brazil. It was like Ernst Enrique Sousa was Ernst's one of his first students, and really took these principles and ran with it. And his veggies started like right next to the house, like 20 years ago or 30 years ago when he started. And now you have to drive like 1.5 kilometers to get to his veggies that are within the syntropic rows. And that's not very efficient. So from a permaculture perspective, there's some tension there that doesn't work very well. That's interesting to think about. And sometimes in our work, we're playing with that tension. We're trying to resolve it in many ways. And so we'll still keep a veggie garden next to the house, even though we're going to plant some horticulture in this Syntropic Agroforestry system that's maybe a 20-minute walk away from the main space. And this is like a lot of the work we're doing, again, from a permaculture perspective, on like whole site design and planning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that it does tie up quite well, because a lot of people think it's a separate permaculture and syntropic ag, which in a way syntropic ag is part of permaculture, but in another way it is totally different in the way that it plants. But yeah, I mean, in this journey for you of like learning syntropic ag, permaculture, all that, what are the biggest challenges you encountered on the way?
Biggest challenges. Well, I would say the recent challenge that I struggle with is that this is the first time in my life in Costa Rica, so 17 years, I don't have my own land, that I'm not like my own garden that I'm working on. So it's this very interesting piece of helping other people plant and realize their gardens and their sites and their dreams, but not having that for myself here in Costa Rica. And so there's a piece of I don't know, how would I say it? It's like sometimes you wonder if you're not in it every day, like who am I to teach about this or share about this or consult about this? And so this is like an interesting personal challenge I face right now. Beyond that, I think the biggest challenges are usually people overextending themselves, like not starting small enough, and having some out of line expectation. That's something we see a lot. We are often professionally brought in to like fix someone else's design, which isn't to say our designs don't have problems. I could go back to something I planted 5 years ago and be like, what was this? And I don't think it'll ever change in my life. I can't imagine, because it's just kind of how it goes. But we see that a lot. People just thinking that because it's like permaculture, syntropic, and it's regenerative and it's beautiful and it's good for the earth, that alone will make it work without really maybe understanding the soil maintenance that's required, density of planting that's required, site selection. They just assume that, oh yeah, you put the fruit tree and you put a Mexican sunflower next to it and a lantana next to it, and it's going to grow. And it doesn't always happen. And sometimes if it's a degraded site, it never happens. And they get really brought down by that. So that's something we're always on the lookout for. And we're really focused, I think, professionally on helping people have early successes, and doing simple things that we're very confident will work before moving them into more complex projects on their land. And that's a big process that we talk to people about, that I think, yeah, if anyone works with clients, it's a really valuable process to like kind of be in that mindset a bit. Other big lessons, gosh, let's see. I think on like in the world of syntropic farming, very specifically, still not planting dense enough. Like, it's kind of shocking. I think like I would still, if I could, even systems we planted, like, you just learn so much every year. But like 3 years ago, even maybe some 2 years ago, like, no, man, we should have planted more. Like always more. And continuing to like push that. So sometimes with clients, I'm like, it's fine, just do this. You're like, man, you know what? We should have really like not let that compromise happen. And I think I think Scott Hall does a good job of this, of simplifying things. I can make things maybe like too much diversity for people. And so sometimes clients will look at the species list and the amount of plants, and it's like too much. When in reality, I probably could have just planted like a single support species, but had it even denser down the row. And so I think we can chill a little bit on diversity, but really, really be adamant about the density in these systems. It's just where we see the benefit over and over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, definitely, I guess for you as a consultant, it's managing people's expectations. And with syntropic farming, a lot of people have high expectations. They see the
Yeah.
life in Syntropy movie. They see the
Uh-huh.
stuff in Brazil happening, and then they apply that to their context and think they're going to get the same. And in truth, you might get way less than what you'd expect. It might take more time, and even with farming in general, expectations, you gotta have low expectations in general. It's like that's what you gotta learn, and that's something beautiful because it allows you to take that in your life as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like it's quite a challenge with that because yeah, a lot of consultants get hired by people that don't know about how much work it's gonna be. They think it's gonna be easy, and even when they tell them, they just ignore like what they've
Yeah.
been told, and that is not the fault of the consultant. That's the fault of
Yeah.
the person. And
I have done the opposite though
yeah,
once. I have he's become a friend, and he's like, I need to. He had planted a couple fruit trees, just getting destroyed by pasture grass. Like nothing good was happening. Small scale, very close to here. And he's like, what should I do? And I was like, well, if it was me, I would plant two syntropic rows, one as a privacy and one as a windbreak on your house. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And he had no idea what syntropic farming was. And I have high expectations for him. Like he wants to be like a in the soil human, and he will arrive there. And so I kind of sneak attacked syntropic farming in there. And we had a big Minga, big work party, and like 20 of his friends showed up and we planted it. And the whole time he's like, what are we doing? What is this? Like, how can we plant this many plants? And he was a bit stunned. And it's been really fun to watch this process. It was maybe a 15-meter long row and a 25-meter long row. And so I knew he could manage it. And because he was already out trying to weed trim around these fruit trees that weren't growing. So I was like, well, I'm just concentrate your energy right here. And so in that case, because I knew this individual, I was like, man, I'm throwing this at him. He doesn't need to know. This is what he needs, and I know he needs it. And so that might be a different strategy you could approach somebody with that like deserves to become a plant person and deserves to be like pulled onto the land more. And be careful about that too.
yeah, I guess very different when it's a friend. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, I mean, I'll just hop onto one more question, and then we'll go into some more philosophical questions about syntropic, which can be quite
Cool.
interesting. Um, so, you know, what do you think? Do you think it makes sense, in a sense, to say that like let's say conservation of ecosystems, they can go hand in hand with syntropic ag because most of the time we think of syntropic ag as it is for farming, and actually I do get quite some people telling me, why do you plant that if it's just for humans? I kind of get that from conservationists and all that. It does happen, but at the end of the day, I mean, I think you'd be the best person to answer that. How we can really fit with conservation of ecosystems using syntropic ag.
I mean, in some ways, it's like why it was created, why this methodology was born from Ernst Gosch in the first place, like his super degraded farm in Bahia, 400 hectares or 380 hectares, something like that. That's now this like huge, beautiful, lush forest, and the story of all the springs coming back. And so, from the context of Brazil, I think it's very interesting to think about like how would you ever convince a farmer to plant trees when they need money and or food in 6 months? And so syntropic farming is a solution to that, where you're getting, your early yield, you're getting a medium yield, you're getting a long-term yield, and that pattern keeps repeating. So on that level, it is a methodology that I think very accurately incentivizes the planting of trees, or it's a healthy incentive. Like sometimes people are incentivized to plant trees through like carbon credits or direct payments or donations of trees. And here in Costa Rica, all of those exist. They very rarely work. I remember talking to Mark Leiber over in Portugal at his place, did a course with him last year, and he was getting a bunch of donations of trees from these a conservation organization, but they weren't sure if they should donate to him because he's going to be cutting these trees down or pollarding them up high. Doesn't fit the classic like reforestation NGO. But nonetheless, they gave him trees, and they also gave a neighbor trees that were just planted out in the grass and ignored. And guess what? 90% of those trees died, while 90% of his trees were still alive. And so that organization was able to see, just through these management practices, the survival rate of this like reforestation effort, even though he's using it to grow food, was drastically different in a syntropic system. So like that is an interesting piece. There's obviously the piece to this of simply creating more life or creating more habitat and microclimate, things like that. We know that happens with polyculture. That's been studied, proven. There's not much more to say about that. What I do think is interesting, and I think this applies both to syntropic farming and holistic management, which are both process-based pieces of agriculture or types of agriculture, is that in syntropic farming, we're in theory able to produce a significant amount more food on smaller pieces of land because of the intensity of farming that's happening, this stacking of plants on top of each other. So we get an additive yield from that piece of land. And what that might mean is, maybe we looked at it from a calorie perspective. Maybe we can get the same amount of calories that would normally come from 1 hectare on 3,000 square meters. I don't know, maybe it's 600 square meters through syntropic farming. And what that means is we can take that other 4,000 square meters, and maybe that just becomes conservation. Maybe that becomes what we call permaculture zone 5, like a forest ecosystem. And like here in Costa Rica, that becomes really important because we are often dealing with lands where the degraded pastures go right up against the streams, or they've been deforested to the top of the slope or on very steep slopes. And there's all of these profiles of land that really are not suitable for farming, really any type of farming. Like we should be protecting the watersheds first, the top of the slope. No one should go on these steep slopes. You should see, like, it's crazy how steep the coffee slopes are. And so if I can go to that coffee farmer and say, hey, you have 10 hectares, but only 5 are really suitable. And by being more intensive, more intentional in these 5, we can outproduce those 10 hectares. Now I can take half of that and it goes into conservation. That's a huge, huge, huge victory. And so that is another way to think of how this relates to the world of conservation and Yeah, well, I think it's very powerful from that perspective.
Yeah, that's definitely that. I mean, in the sense that if you can farm more intensively, you can also protect more certain other spaces, I guess. And at the same time, actually, with the syntropic farming itself, wouldn't surprise me that certain species that would be deemed like extinct would just come back because of that, for example. It wouldn't surprise me at all. So it is yet it's this thing as well. Like we don't actually need it to be proven. It's just pretty clear that that's what it's going to be. It's like logic. It's like common sense. And yeah, we don't need these studies to necessarily tell us that. It's just pretty clear.
I mean, you know, like we can go into philosophy right now. Like it's this piece of trust, and
Yeah,
I think I certainly come from a background of like linear thought, like US white male, masculine spreadsheets, um, very, very ordered. Um, and I think one of the things that attracts people to permaculture is that it is not dogmatic. It does not have a metaphysical background, doesn't have a religion behind it, it doesn't have a spiritual practice behind it. Nonetheless, you spend time in nature, you keep spending time in nature, you keep spending time in nature, whether it's your garden or the little forest, and you just, all you're going to see are miracles. And you plant a tree and it's a fucking miracle. And you like that little seed that's going to become this,
yeah,
30-meter tall thing and produce infinite life. And so you can't not arrive at a place of awe and wonder and joy and magic and mystery. And for me, that's enough. And I do not know what happens when I prune the Mexican sunflower that's right next to the avocado, that's right next to the cacao. Like, I don't know what happens in the soil. There's some studies, but I don't know. I don't know when that Mexican sunflower, like when it has a growth pulse, if that's communicating something to that avocado, telling it to grow as well. Like, I don't really know. If there's someone out there that really knows that, I'd be surprised. Like, can we ever even prove that? Do I care? That's the more interesting question. Like, I think through deep observation, we're going to find those answers for ourselves and in our context. And that is like 1,000 times more valuable, in my opinion, than the scientific like literature proving these relationships. And I think that's the old model in many ways. Those are old tools. They still have value, but for me, they can no longer be like put on a pedestal above personal experience, above what we might call like an indigenous worldview, where we see the mystery and the magic in plants and animals and rocks and water and life. And so that's how I look at this a lot. And it's a big piece of trust, and I appreciate that people want more concrete numbers. I have no interest in like trying to measure those things. We have clients that adore measuring things. That's all they want to do. And I'm always like, sounds hard. Sounds like a lot of work. Um, but that's been my evolution. I wouldn't have agreed with that statement probably 15 years ago. And I argue with people, with clients mostly who are friends as well about it, who are very like, no, we have to measure carbon. I'm going to an amazing client's farm and on Sunday, and he's obsessed with carbon in a great way. And he's doing great things for the world. But it's like carbon, carbon, carbon. We need to measure carbon. This is going to tell us everything. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't measure these things. That might not resolve anything. We've been measuring things for a long time, with not a lot of great results. Doesn't seem like things are getting particularly better.
Yeah, it seems like well, to me, it's very clear that nature has an element of it that is not measurable, and that's just the mystery of
Thank
life,
goodness.
basically. And that's a good thing, because actually, if you try to understand all these things, you actually disconnect from nature, because you're all doing it intellectually, I believe. And yeah, this root exudates and these hormones like the gibberellin and all that. It's like, yeah, I mean, we could be explain how that works, but still, it's like it's not something we'll know. It's not something we'll visually like understand. It's just not possible. And the soil, I mean, the soil, like what's below, we don't see. We don't even see the root horizons below. We only see the what's going on above. We don't know
And as
what's
soon
going
as
on in
we
the
do
ground.
measure it, what will happen? Somebody's going to take that, they're going to extract
Yeah,
the exact hormone and they're going to synthesize it in a lab and then they're going to sell it back to us. And maybe that'll be good. I don't know. But my gut is like, really? Like you sure that that one plant can't do that for me? It might be able to
yeah.
and I don't know, it's fascinating
Yeah,
process and it's an important conversation, I think.
for sure. And I want to dive more into it, like actually with your background and what you've done, and also having been quite disconnected for a while as well when you're doing economics. It'd be really interesting to actually get your take on how can one reconnect with nature using these practices, or even like generally speaking. But I know that there's an element with syntropic ag that can reconnect you to nature as well, which is this
Mhm.
element of joy and of satisfaction that we were talking about, which is
Mhm.
also deeply important.
Yeah, I think it's such an important piece to this. I think it's very personal. I think almost everyone has to find their like gateway into this, and that might be through food. It might be through like cooking, and you start realizing the ingredients you're using aren't very healthy, and now you want healthier ingredients, so you go to the farmer's market and you buy them there. But now you're curious about the farmer, and you go to his farm and you see it, and you go, ah, maybe I can do that, and it just starts this snowball process. And I think that's really really important for people. We have a client right now in a little like surf town, not a nice one, like a
Mm-hmm.
surf town that's looks like Florida here in Costa Rica. Um, she bought like a little lot. She was burned out from her job. It's like in the middle of the city, and all she wants to do is become a plant person. She's like, I just want to know about plants. And she's like, I don't know, she's like 10, maybe like 15 square meters of soil in this lot. Like the rest is cement in a pool. It's not a lot. You can't like grow all your own food in that. You can't plant a giant syntropic orchard, obviously, but it's enough space to spend time with plants and insects every day. And so we're getting her set up with a field journal. Very simple. Like, hey, every day you're there, get your field journal. If you want to do it on your computer, fine. Buy a fancy notebook, whatever you want, whatever works for you. And you're just out there and you're writing down what you see. Maybe you're sketching things. Maybe you have a rain gauge and you're writing down the number. Like I think consistency is really important for people. That was key for me. It was like, all right, this moment when I joined this project, Rancho Mastatal, and for 8 months of the year, I was just in it every day. I was walking by the same plants every day. It was the first time that I realized that that bird I was seeing on the branch, like outside our cabin, it was a matma, a guarabaranca, beautiful tropical bird. It hit me one day, like every day it's the same bird. It's a bird. It flies and it goes somewhere else, and another bird comes through, and I was like, no, this bird lives right here. It knows me. It knows my rhythms. It knows exactly when I'm like pooping in the compost toilet, when I'm taking a shower in the afternoon, when I'm like out with a weed trimmer or the machete. That bird knows me better than I know it. And I couldn't have had that realization without just being in that space every day. And that's why I think a lot of our work, whether it's like an in-person course or with a client or just with friends or conversations like this, like I just want people to start. There's this line that a lot of people are sitting on over here where they're watching videos like this and reading blogs and on Instagram and they're learning about this topic, they're thinking about it, maybe they're talking about it, and I like want to get them across this line where they're practicing. And that could be so many things. Like just put a seed in the ground and watch it germinate. Has so much value. And so that ends up being, I think, a lot of our work. And for everybody, it's different, like what that line is, why they're not able to go across it easily, or maybe they cross and they come back, they get out of practice. That's very common. So, what is it that keeps people in that practice? And I think the word you use right now I really like is like satisfaction. And so what do you draw satisfaction from? Like I love walking through these systems and just pruning. It's like brings me such joy. Like I don't care if I'm harvesting anything. I just love it. It's like a very comfortable work, especially like when there's a little canopy over you, shade starting to form. I love the process. So seeing these things evolve and that learning and thinking about, oh, what I'll do different the next time, that for me drives me in many ways. And so I think everyone has to find that in themselves a bit. Um, and it could be in so many different ways. One of our neighbors here, I think she was like, I want to be a better gardener. So we helped her plant her landscape and go through a little bit of this mentorship process with her. Um, and she was like struggling to get out in the garden, struggling to get out in the garden. Then she got a dog. And so, okay, the dog like brings her out to the garden all the time. And that it was like a trigger. It was just something that like changed her habit and her process. And I could probably map like the moment she got the dog with the like happiness of her plants, and they're both like like going up together. And so I don't know, it's just interesting thing. Sometimes it's unexpected like that. So I think everyone has to find their own little moment, their own little thing that like pulls them into this, and then being consistent with it, and trying to find the piece that gives you satisfaction, where you start building a competency. I like that word as well. I like feeling competent. So I'm looking for those activities um, that I'm on the edge of competency, and then moving into like, okay, I know how to do this. All right. And I keep evolving and advancing, etc. Yeah, it's very helpful for me.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, definitely. I mean, just getting involved in the world of plants in and of itself, I think, does that. And then, yeah, as you say, it could be
It's the
through
best.
cooking. It could be through cooking, like seeing like the better quality in that. Honestly, for me as a person, I would have a very hard time to connect with nature if I'm in a city. I just find that impossible. And some people can somehow. They still do their like balcony and all that, but their
Birding,
balcony, yeah, I mean,
bird watching in the city is
yeah,
apparently super cool.
yeah, I mean, things are pretty strange to me, but I understand that people like they do with what they have. But for me, I definitely need a big space with freedom as well. Like, a big space really does help a lot to just connect because that's the
Yeah.
way. Like concrete
Yeah.
actually, all the concrete in all the houses and all the cars, all that. I mean, it totally disconnects you automatically. It's not
I've
something.
never lived in a city.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm lost. After
Yeah,
like 4 days, I'm like, I just spent all my money. That was great. I need to be gone now.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just like so. Also, this is something we have to accept, which is actually we won't get a change in paradigm when most people actually live in the city because it disconnects them automatically from that. Entertainment is like distraction, all that. It does that too. So in a way, that's why we also notice all this people going back to the countryside as well. I mean, in some way, they feel that call. I think and
Totally. Yeah.
yeah, at the end of the day, I reckon like yes, Syntropic Ag plays a big role actually in reconnecting. I mean, not just that, it could be holistic management, it could be actually anything, it could be just farming, even conventionally. Some people
Totally.
find that this way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
I
reckon
think
that
one thing I can say on that I
yeah,
think is interesting is people ask us about this. Like we'll start a permaculture course and people will be like, how does permaculture deal with like the disconnection of life in cities? Like I remember this question from a student, and I was reflecting on it, and I kind of came to the conclusion like we don't have a good answer. Like I don't think it's the responsibility of
exactly.
syntropic farming and all our practitioners, permaculture and all the practitioners to like solve these problems. These are like
Yeah.
massive problems, and our disconnection from nature is perhaps the most like root problem birthed in Genesis and Adam and Eve getting like kicked out of the Garden of Eden, literally or metaphorically, however you want to look at that. That was our disconnection, and everything that happened from that moment. Like, how are we going to solve that with syntropic farming? Like, we can't pretend that this is going to just like resolve everything in the world. It's a process, and we can take responsibility for ourselves, probably our communities around us, some responsibility for that, and that might be it, and that might be enough too. But I think it's important. Like if people are like, "Oh, is syntropic farming going to feed the world?" I'm like, I don't know, man. We don't feed the world now. So why do I think this other thing's going to just like feed the whole world? Like that would be beautiful, but I think it might be the wrong question.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that question in of itself absolves you of of the responsibility, thinking that it's someone else that needs to fix it for you. But in
A
truth,
hundred percent.
everyone needs to deal with that themselves in a way. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can teach, you can be a living example of it. That's the best way you can do it, and you can't control what other people are doing. And I see that a lot within more like activism and all that. People just try to control people that they don't have the awareness yet of that. So you can't really force that onto people,
Yeah.
and not everyone's going to realize that. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's a personal process people have to go through, and it will just happen on its own. You can't force it.
Yeah. And
I reckon.
I think the world of activism is very interesting. And I feel like we have this distinct role as as people in syntropic farming or in permaculture that is supported by, or we support activism. Like the activist in many ways is trying to dismantle the current system. Usually in that process, in my experience, they're not simultaneously dreaming of the system they want, because to dismantle the current system is like hard. You have to be so focused, and you're going to get burned out, which is what seems to happen to most activists. And so what I view my role in this is like showing, dreaming of the world that we want to arrive at. And so I'm glad there's people that are trying to dismantle parts of this world today that I do not think serve us. Um, Whether that's like activists in farming that are looking at how migrant workers are treated on industrial farms, for example, very relevant to our work. And I want to be the one who's envisioning the farm of the future and what it needs to look like in 20 years, so that when people are working on that 20 years, they have dignified jobs, they're comfortable, it's safe and healthy for their bodies and their minds, etc. And so I think we have a really nice balancing role to that world. And it doesn't mean everyone has to be everything. I really think we have to avoid looking for solutions that solve all of the world's problems at once. I don't think that exists.
Yeah, I like what you said there because basically what you're offering here is rather than dismantling the old system, you offering a replacement without getting frustrated at the current system, which is why it burns out a lot of activists, I believe. At the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I mean, if you dismantle something but you don't have a better replacement instead, it serves no purpose. It's just
It serves
destruction
no purpose.
for
Yeah,
no recreation, basically. But
totally.
yeah, yeah, I mean, it's a yeah, it's definitely a quite interesting thing, and it makes me. I'm going to just ask you the last question, which is as well quite philosophical. It's and that's something that I know. I know only maybe one channel on YouTube that touches on that, which is Syntropic Gardener, Victor Pires. You
Uh-huh.
know of him?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
the
not a
philosophy
lot, but
talks a
I've
lot.
certainly come across it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long while. It's been a while. I haven't watched his videos, but um, he kind of touches on how the idea of syntropy can actually help us improve our own lives in a way
Mm.
because it's nature. It's just patterns that are reproduced within nature, within our own lives, our own brains, our own communities, etc. And yeah, I just want to ask you, what do you think about how do you think we can apply syntropic principles to improve our lives?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a fun question. I relate most to the idea of disturbance and growth pulse. A very simple like idea that some things need to die in my life. Maybe it's a bad habit. Maybe it's a project that like maybe it's a friendship. Like things need to be pruned in our lives. in all senses of that. And I think what people often see on like a pattern level is as soon as you cut that thing out, something new bursts in it. There's a really close friend here who's a world-class herbalist, and she was just like struggling to get her courses filled, and people weren't coming, and it was like a new struggle. She's like, "Why? This isn't, I've never had this problem before." And it was like 2, 3 years, and she changed her relationship. We got out of a partnership with an amazing human who we're also friends with, and it was sad and hard. It was disturbance. Um, and she suddenly found that people were signing up for her courses. And are those directly related? Like, I don't know. In the same way, like if I prune that tithonia, does it help the avocado get a growth pulse? Like, I don't really know. But we can see there's still a relationship there, of creating space for something new. Um, I've been in a work moment of being very overwhelmed, like too much going on, like all the projects I'm excited about, but they all happened at once. And I've just been like, fuck, it was not. Oh, can I curse on your channel?
No problem, man.
Just kidding. Um, and feeling very overwhelmed, and is like, well, okay, well, something needs to be pruned. I need a disturbance here. And okay, how drastic is this? Like a maintenance pruning or formation pruning? My partner, she's like, cut it all, cut all your clients. Let's go travel for a year, spend all your savings. She's like ready to go full clearing to clearing of my life. I don't know if I'm ready for that. We'll see. Can check in like a year maybe. But I think that principle I find really relevant, and it's just very simple. You're just like creating sunlight for something new. And taking these things that are dying, that are in senescence, and yeah, let's take them down, put them in the ground, let them cycle back into our life in new ways, and give vibrancy to what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's the principle of syntropy I would actually find that I can relate the most to actually with this as well. There's a growth pulse and disturbance. That's definitely that. And we could just see that our lives just improve a lot when we go through, well, let's say doing the hard thing, and then yeah, getting some things, some habits, some people out of our lives, and that's the way it helps, and we can clearly see the results, and we can see 1 year down the line, well, I've improved, like
So
like
much.
an avocado would have a growth pulse after being, like having a plant nearby prune, as you
Yeah.
were saying.
And
It's
I
pretty
think
interesting.
I speak for myself, but also speak broadly. I think for men in particular, this is really important. We don't have that regular cycle that women
Agreed,
can
yeah.
relate to. And so we tend to just be like linear and go and go and go and go and go and go and go. And we don't have these built-in moments of rest. And so often what happens in our lives, and I can relate to this, I've had this experience, is like you're just going, 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 and building up. And then like the disturbance happens in a way that's very unhealthy. Failure in a relationship, the business goes under, a divorce, all these things that I think are really common in because we don't do these maintenance prunings and these cycles, and we're not in those cyclical moments. And so I think that's really important for people to pay attention to in their own lives. And perhaps every time you go out and you like cut the Mombasa grass or whatever in your system, or the rosemary with your hedge trimmers, might think about what needs to be shed from your own day-to-day world as well. It's a
Yeah,
great
it's interesting.
opportunity.
Like a sort of image comes in mind, like as you say, if you don't do the formation pruning, like on your fruit tree, let's say, you might have to just cut it down to the ground to get a new sucker to come out. That's what happens
Yeah, you
after.
you you might have to top work a new graft on top of it and find a
Yeah,
new life
exactly.
path. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
just manufacture that. Yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting because like you can find a lot of metaphors with these principles really apply in our
so
lives.
much.
So many. And I think the growth pulse and the disturbance, that's just one little part of it, really, at the end of the day. It
Hmm.
must be a lot more. Not that I've delved much into it, but starting to be interested in it. And yeah, I mean, it's very interesting how these patterns in nature just replicate themselves in us in a way. It's like everywhere the same.
We are nature, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's the same thing. So at the end of the day, it's the process is done in a different way, but we could make patterns and understand that as well.
Yeah, it's
I guess.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice. Well, anyway, like we kind of done with the questions, so I just want to ask you where we can find you, and I think you have a course coming up soon. If you want to talk a little bit more about that,
of course.
that'd be great.
Yeah. I'm on social media, Scott Plants Trees. Our company is called Porvenir Design. So you can go to our website, a beautiful website, and we are launching. Today is Friday, February 20th. On Monday, we launch a 6-month, or opening the doors to enrollment for what will be a 6-month online permaculture design course focused on the tropics. So if anyone out there is listening to this in the tropics, looking for support, it's going to be, we're really trying to push the edge of effective and powerful online education. We've partnered with a program called Regenerative Living, really amazing online educator, Javin Bernakovich. And yeah, excited to get this course out there. So if anybody's looking to join, we'll have a good pre-launch price. We'll touch into syntropic farming within it. But it could be a great complement to anyone out there who has a site and is trying to figure out what to do with it.
Right. Well, anyway, I'll add all these links in the description.
Gracias.
So that'd be great. I mean, it was a great conversation here. Like, really enjoyed it, and hopefully we can do some other collaborations in the future. I hope for that.
In person, in the Mediterranean somewhere.
Yeah. Let's hope that I can come visit and you can come visit at some point.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
that'd be a dream. We're not so far from each other there.
No, not true. We're not that far. So, anyways, the next interview I'm going to do is going to be with Joshua Anderson in Ibiza. I'm actually going. I'm going this weekend actually to interview him.
Fun.
So that's going to be a great one, and the first in-person interview on the channel. So that's going to be interesting. And really enjoyed the conversation. And man, stay in touch.
Yeah, man, great to connect and keep up the great work that you're doing. It's I learned a ton from everything you're sharing on the school platform and elsewhere.